I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story and welcome to Friday night. Tonight, after 34 years, it looks like the state of Oregon might actually begin taking steps to tighten regulations and protect groundwater in eastern Oregon. That's important because groundwater is also drinking water for thousands of mostly low-income people. And the state has a plan for the Lubguama, and that's our big story tonight. Now, I know that's a crazy term, Lubguama. It stands for the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area. How about that? I've memorized and forgotten that several times over the last year. But it is the term that everyone involved uses, so, okay, now you know. It describes an area in both Umatilla and Morrow counties that have significant groundwater pollution, and it's affecting the aquifer under a huge patch of land. We touched on just one part of that last night when we told you the Port of Morrow wants to change part of its permit relating to spreading nitrate-laden wastewater in the Lubguama. And we did not plan to run this story tonight, by the way, but what are you going to do? The state released its long-awaited plan this morning, and it really is a big deal, so we wanted to get it to you now instead of making you wait until next week. So here we are. First, a quick reminder and a background to get everyone up to speed, and then we'll get into the plan. 34 years ago, the state of Oregon discovered a massive aquifer covering 562 square miles near the town of Boardman is contaminated with nitrates. The chemical you cannot see, taste, or smell is harmful for people above limits set by the EPA, especially infants and pregnant women. Well, many wells in the area have those nitrate levels that are above those limits. In the Lubguama, as many as 4,500 wells have drilled down through the earth to get water from the contaminated aquifer for cooking and bathing and drinking and more. But over the decades, nitrates from farm fertilizer, commercial food production, and large animal operations have seeped down into the water, making the contamination worse. And for decades, the state has relied mostly on voluntary actions to try to stop the contamination, and that has not worked at all. Over the last year and a half, growing pressure has prompted the state agencies to take a look at what they're doing and pledge to do more. I've talked with many of the key players about the growing problem.
Let's deal with the emergency that it is while really beginning to pull together all the different parts of the state and other local jurisdictions to address the long-term issues that we know folks are experiencing out there.
So we've been in the area, we've been doing this. You're right, things are not improving. And so I think what's really happening today is a concerted effort to bring in more agencies to look at more diverse authorities.
So I think we're at a really unique point in time with the work that you've done, with the work that the community has done, with the leadership of Governor Kotek in bringing people together to really look at this and say, yes, more needs to be done. We need to do more, we need to do better, and we need to work together collectively with everyone.
Okay, so those were interviews that I've shot over the past months teeing up this report. The report out this morning is their answer, their plan of attack. 4 state agencies pledged to work together. They include the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, the Oregon Water Resources Department, and the Oregon Health Authority. And I know they should naturally work together, but apparently you gotta get them to formally commit. The biggest change that I saw in reviewing the plan came from the Oregon Department of Agriculture. They plan to develop new compliance benchmarks for irrigation, although they don't seem too firm about their plan. They write in the report, the framework being considered includes establishing specific thresholds for soil nitrate levels, requiring record keeping for nitrate and irrigation application, and conducting post-harvest soil nitrate testing. Now, I want to highlight that. That would be a huge change. The state estimates about 70% of the problem with the nitrate contamination comes from farming over there. But it's unclear whether it's farming practices 50 years ago or last week. Currently, most of the farms in the area in the Lubguama do not have to keep records or share any records documenting how much fertilizer they use, when they use it, or where they use it. Requiring that would be a first step in figuring out if too much is still being used and contributing to the problem right now. The ODA also plans to tighten up existing rules involving huge feedlots. They're called CAFOs. They generate a lot of poop and pee that are spread out into the fields as fertilizer. And they plan to study the problem even more, including using something called strategic implementation areas, which will get special focus. The DEQ, for their part, is going to update and modernize wastewater permits in the area to minimize nitrate leaching into the aquifer. The agency will also partner with Umatilla County to regulate septic systems in the area. And they're going to study a series of 30 wells, taking readings 4 times a year to see if they can figure out whether the nitrates in the groundwater are moving around or getting worse or better. The Oregon Water Resources Department will inspect wells and make sure that they are built correctly. They will also work with the counties to study whether some well owners can be connected to existing city water supplies, which are clean. They also want to build a new model for the aquifer using recent data, and they will continue to collect water samples through their well monitoring system. Finally, the Oregon Health Authority is going to continue doing what it's already doing, mainly free tests of well water for folks in the Loop Guama area, free water delivery to folks with dangerous levels of nitrates in their water, continue to share information about the dangers of nitrates in drinking water, and work with counties on extending or creating new public water systems to get safe water to people in the Loop Guama. One of the biggest champions for people using the wells in the Loop Guama is the former Morrow County Commissioner named Jim Doherty. He's also a farmer and a rancher there. I included him in my series about the problems out there, which you can find on our YouTube page, by the way. While he was the county chair, Doherty declared an emergency because of the tainted water. It was the first emergency of its kind in state history. It made a lot of things happen, and it also got him tossed out of politics with a recall vote. I talked to him today and asked him what he thought of the state's plan. He said it's better late than never, but he also feels that farmers are still being given a pass, protected, even though they are 70% of the problem.
Some of the suggested self-reporting and these things will be initiated in 2026. It said after extensive, landowner and farmer and agricultural input through the year of 2025. So as a subset of this, they're going to allow those folks to come in and weigh in before anything, comes their way. Conversely, that didn't happen for the general public.
Of course, not everyone agrees with Jim Doherty. There are some with ties to Eastern Oregon who are cheering the plan tonight. One of them is Justin Green. He's the former DEQ statewide water quality administrator for Oregon. He's now the executive director of a group called Water for Eastern Oregon. It's made up of farmers and businesses who operate in or near the Loop Guama area. He thinks the state's plan is great.
The Department of Agriculture's work with their strategic implementation area, going into the basin, inventorying agricultural operations, working with farmers directly to learn more about their nutrient management and farming practices is going to be really important, both for farmers to learn more about their operations, but also for ODA to learn what technology farmers are using. As the plan recognized, irrigation and farming technology has really evolved exponentially in the last 20 years, and we're excited to show off that evolution in the technology that's used in modern farming operations.
On the other side, Oregon Rural Action. They're a group in the area trying to help the people with the wells who are living with the contaminated water. Their director of policy and research says the state's plan is more like a list of things it has done or will continue doing, and he is particularly unimpressed with the Department of Ag's language about a framework being considered to force farmers to document how much fertilizer they're using.
You'd think that'd be a no-brainer, right? 70% of the nitrate in the groundwater is coming from fertilizer use by the irrigated ag sector. And in all the time we've been working on this as a state, we've never required that. Maybe it's just me, but a plan for dealing with that would look like this is what we are going to do. This is how we are going to regulate this problem. And then the steps and the timeline for getting there. Rather than this vague allusion to something they might do, right?
Okay, so there you go. There's a lot there we just fed up for you. For me, the biggest takeaway is the state agencies are serious about working on the problem, that it may take decades to fix, and while their plan is far from perfect, it is a start. Maybe 3 decades late, but a start nonetheless, and even a little action is encouraging. So, what's your take on this? Are you impressed the state agencies are working together? Not impressed by what you've seen? Something else? Let us know. Send us your thoughts. The email address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. Our phone number is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. And by the way, if you paid attention this summer, you know that it's been a record year for wildfires in Oregon. All those flames have torched the budget of Oregon's Department of Forestry. That's the department that pays for most of the firefighting. Now it says it's in danger of going broke. Evan Watson has our story.
By just about any metric, the 2024 Oregon fire season was a brutal one. Flames swept across the state, mostly east of the Cascades.
And the scale, people have to see it to understand just how many acres burned across the state this summer. And just because the smoke wasn't present in our more populated areas doesn't mean that they were deeply impactful.
Kyle Williams manages fire operations for the Oregon Department of Forestry, a state agency that's now out of money to pay firefighters and contractors, facing much higher bills than they expected.
Unprecedented fire season, right? We've got more acres burned this summer than we've had in the recorded, at least, history of Oregon. And so with that, right, unprecedented cost.
ODF reports 1.9 million acres of land burned this year, nearly double the acreage that burned in the notorious 2020 wildfires, and far above any of the last 30 years. Fighting fires on that scale takes more money, and there's a normal process for ODF to get that money. Outside of the legislative session, agencies turn to Oregon's Emergency Board. This e-board allocates emergency funds to keep things afloat until lawmakers return. All kinds of state agencies submit their requests for the funding. ODF is asking for $47.5 million from the e-board this September, including $40 million from its general fund to cover immediate expenses. And that's a big ask, considering the e-board only has $43 million to give from its general fund.
In those e-board requests, there's a lot of really important priorities for other agencies, for other Oregonians, right, not impacted by fire.
The e-board meets next week, and the Legislative Fiscal Office recommends that the board pay that $47 million to the Forestry Department. It has an idea for a slight workaround: use just $20 million from the general fund and make up the other $20 million with funds designated for natural disaster emergencies. But there's a bigger concern. The Fiscal Office says the Department of Forestry will need much more than the $47 million in the coming months, writing, "Cash projections indicate insolvency in November and a shortfall of $54 million by January. ODF will receive a payroll loan from the state's Department of Administrative Services to cover payroll just through the end of the year, and that still might not be enough." Williams says everything will work out.
It will happen that we will pay our vendors. We will take care of our firefighters. I have no doubt in my mind.
But with wildfire costs mounting each year,
is this sustainable?
It sure is challenging.
Before 2013, Oregon wildfire costs averaged around $11 million a year. Since then, due to climate change and other factors, costs have skyrocketed, surging past $100 million in 2018, 2020, and 2021. And then there's this year. ODF reports $250 million in wildfire costs, and that number is still growing.
I mean, the competition for resources that this scale of fire drives makes them really scarce and hard to be able to get. And in order for those vendors to be able to contribute, right, they have to be able to pay their people. We have to be able to pay our people.
There's a state work group looking at new ways to pay for fighting wildfires in the years to come. Williams says even if the state figures out how to pay for everything this year, that change is needed.
I would like to think that future fire seasons won't be quite at this scale. I think the statistics tell me that that's probably not going to be accurate.
Evan joins me now. Okay, so costs are way up, but why?
The Department of Forestry tells me a couple of things. There's multiple reasons here. One of those being that these firefighters are working more days than they have in years past. So just payroll being one of the biggest expenses, right? If they're still out there, even to this day, fighting fires, especially in Eastern Oregon, that's going to cost more money. Another thing being that with more wildfires, more acreage, those resources become a little more scarce. Everyone wants access, federal, state, other partners, to the helicopters, the planes, whoever's dropping water, things like that. They have to pay more in order to get them. So
Gotcha.
a couple of interesting points there.
Scarce resource, price goes up,
Right.
especially with the private contractors, I imagine.
Yeah.
Second thing then, when the E-board meets, fire, I'm betting, is going to get what they want. So who gets elbowed out?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The Legislative Fiscal Office told me, as I asked just on background, I said, hey, it feels like fire would get priority. Has that historically been the case? And they admitted, yeah, that's kind of how it works, right? A wildfire is top of the list. But Port of Portland is asking for different things that might get shoved aside, or public defenders, like we've covered here on the table when it comes to corrections, when it comes to Department of Justice. They're looking for things there. So we'll track it next week. I don't want to jump ahead and say who's automatically going to not get money, because they can make a decision we don't know is coming. But it is something we're going to look at and see, hey, what gets turned down because fire is costing so much more.
Yeah, some tough decisions for the members of that committee. All right, thank you, Evan Watson. Great stuff. Coming up next now in the story, a major step forward for the new I-5 bridge project between Portland and Vancouver. A highly anticipated document, several thousand pages long, was released this morning. It sheds new light on what's ahead for the new crossing, while at the same time leaving some questions unanswered. We'll take a deep dive like only we can do when the story returns. After months of delay, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project passed a big milestone this morning with the release of its draft supplemental environmental impact statement. It's basically a massive in-depth study of all the benefits and impacts on everything from traffic and bike access to air quality and fish habitats. Just how in-depth are we talking? Well, including all the supporting technical reports, it's a little over 12,000 pages, and we're reading them all. No, we're not. Just kidding. We will take a closer look in the coming weeks, but for tonight, we're just going to hit some of the key highlights. The document is structured as a comparison between two scenarios, one in which it's the year 2045 and we built the whole new project as proposed, the other in which is 2045 and we're still using the current bridges, assuming they haven't collapsed. No surprise, the document paints a rosier picture in the new bridge scenario. It shows significantly fewer hours of congestion per day and faster trips for rush hour commuters between Vancouver and Portland.
We see about an 8-minute or 4 to 8 minute reduction in the build scenarios compared to the no build for the southbound direction in the morning, and you see a bigger increase in travel or benefit in travel times than the northbound.
Bus riders, by the way, would see similar improvements, and a light rail trip from Vancouver to Portland would be about 47 minutes, which would be either on par with a bus ride or a bit better depending on traffic. Transit ridership would be almost twice as high, they expect, on a new bridge, according to the document. It's worth remembering, though, that we're not talking about improvements from the way things are right now. We're talking about improvements compared to how things would be if we're still stuck with the current bridge in 2045 with increased traffic. So these are all projections that are like 2 decades out. The document also looks at some of the more near-term impacts during construction, most notably property acquisition, the big bad eminent domain, and also tolls. Back in May, we got an early version of a document that said the project was expected to displace a total of 43 residential units and 33 businesses. When we asked the bridge team for comment on that, they said, whoa, 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 whoa. That's just an early version. Those numbers could still change. And I guess technically they did. They went up by 3. The official version released today puts the total at 43 residents and 36 businesses, which collectively employ more than 600 people.
The impacts to businesses and people is real to us as it is to them. And so we are taking every step to avoid and minimize those. And that's what this is, one of those steps is documenting those impacts in the project that we're studying.
As for the tolls, this is another thing we already knew. The project is going to use pre-completion tolling. That means you're going to start paying to cross the current bridge while the new ones are still being built. The document mentioned tolls ranging from $1.45 to $2.95, depending on the time of day. But those are pretty much placeholders. The final toll rates will be set by a committee of Oregon and Washington transportation officials. When will tolling start on the old bridge? Another placeholder date here, but it shows April 1st of 2026, so about 18 months from now. The project team hopes to have early construction underway by that point. That construction process, by the way, is going to continue between 4 to 7 years to finish the new bridge, and then 9 to 15 years to finish every piece of the project. So, when you drive through and you go, this has been going on for a long time, yeah, you'll be right. So, not anytime soon for the completion. There are a few things this new document does not answer about the project, by the way. The biggest question is whether the new bridge will be a drawbridge like the current crossing. The bridge team is still trying to convince the U.S. Coast Guard to let them ditch the drawbridge part, which is why the document leaves that as an open question. At a news conference today, program and staff said they're going to need to have the answer to that question by the time they release the final version of this document, which is sometime next summer. We're also still waiting on an updated cost estimate. The price tag right now, $6 billion, but that's a bit outdated. We're working, they are working, we're not. They're working on a new estimate, but don't expect to hear about that until sometime next year. At the moment, the bridge folks want to hear from you, though. That's the main reason why they're making such a big deal out of this document. It marks the start of a 60-day public comment period. Tonight, we'll have links to the full document on our website, kgw.com, and from there, you can find out how to submit your comments. And of course, we do want to hear from you here at The Story. What do you think about the new-ish details? Anything stand out? Email The Story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. We'll be right back. Good news for those of you who love the Thompson Elk statue that once stood in downtown Portland. We now have a better idea of when it's going to return to its pedestal, but you know, you got to be patient. It won't happen until the middle of next year at the earliest. It's been 4 years since the Thompson Elk was taken down from its fountain in Southwest Main Street. People damaged it during the racial justice protests in 2020. This week, Portland City Council approved a bid to repair the statue and the fountain. The contract they approved is for $1.8 million. Council had initially set $1.5 million aside for the restoration, but they also have $700,000 from insurance helping cover the rest. It's set to be finished by next summer if everything goes according to plan. Big part of the reason it's taking so long and costing so much has to do with the granite fountain. The city decided to seek out the same granite from Vermont that was used back when the fountain was built more than 100 years ago. They also need specialized stonemasons to restore the parts that were damaged. How about that? Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching, and remember the story, our collective story, that never ends. Timbers 360 is coming your way next, and in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. I hope you get outside. I'll see you right back here, 6:30 Monday night.